My niece pushed cold leftovers onto my plate and said, "Mom says you're family trash." I smiled in that moment, but something inside me quietly broke. Before I tell you this story, let me say something softly. If you have ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace, if you have ever swallowed words because they were family, then this story is for you. Please like this video, subscribe, and settle in. This is not a loud revenge story. It is a quiet one. And it begins with me. My name is Clara. I am the younger sister. I have always been the background person in my family, not the troublemaker, not the favorite, just there. Growing up, I learned early how to stay small. I learned to wait my turn. I learned not to interrupt. When my parents spoke, I listened. When my sister spoke, everyone listened. That sister is Denise. She is older than me by 6 years. 6 years can feel like a lifetime when you are young. Denise was confident. She laughed loudly. She filled rooms without trying. I admired her. I followed her. I carried her shadow like it was mine. People used to say, "Denise will go far." No one ever said that about me, and that was okay. I told myself I was not unhappy. I just lived quietly. I never married. Life didn't turn that way for me. And after a while, I stopped forcing it. I worked at the same library for over 20 years. Books made sense to me. They were honest. They never raised their voices. I lived in a small house with pale walls and old furniture. Nothing fancy, nothing loud. My joy came from routine, morning coffee, evening walks, soft music playing while I cooked. Family dinners were the one thing I never missed. No matter how tired I was, no matter how invisible I felt, because family mattered to me, even when I did not seem to matter to them. Denise married young. She married a man who matched her energy, strong opinions, strong voice. Together they built a big life, a big house, a big presence. They had one child, a daughter named Lily. Lily was beautiful, bright eyes, quick smile. She was loved fiercely, protected loudly, and raised in Denise's image. From the moment Lily could speak, Denise decided everything for her. What she wore, what she believed, who mattered. I adored Lily. I brought her books. I remembered her birthdays. I showed up. She called me Aunt Clara, in a sweet voice when she was little. That voice used to warm me. I didn't notice when it changed. Not at first. Every Sunday Denise hosted dinner. It was not optional. It was expected. The same long table, the same seats, the same conversations. I usually arrived early. That was my habit. I helped in the kitchen, chopped vegetables, set plates. Denise would rush around, giving orders. She never asked if I was tired. She never thanked me. I told myself she was busy. I told myself I understood. At the table I spoke less and less, not because I had nothing to say, but because no one seemed to hear me. Sometimes Denise would correct me mid-sentence. Sometimes she would laugh at something I said. Not cruel laughter, just enough to remind me where I stood. Lily watched all of this. Children always do. There was a feeling that grew quietly in my chest. Not anger, not yet. It was something heavier, something sadder. It felt like being tolerated instead of wanted, like being included out of habit, not love. I ignored that feeling for a long time, because acknowledging it would mean changing something. And I was afraid of that. I thought staying silent was the kind thing, the mature thing, the loving thing. I did not know then that silence can teach others how to treat you, and I did not know that a child would one day say out loud what an adult had been saying in private. That moment was coming, quietly, like a storm you don't hear until it is already over you, and when it arrived, it would change everything. After every Sunday dinner, I drove home in silence. No radio, no phone calls. Just the sound of the road and my own thoughts. I often replayed small moments in my head. Things I wished I had said, things I was glad I had not. By the time I reached my house, I always told myself the same thing. They didn't mean it, they're just busy. That's just how Denise is. I said those words so often, they started to sound like truth, growing up beside Denise. Denise and I grew up in the same house, but we lived very different lives inside it. She was bold even as a child. She asked for things, she expected answers. I waited, I adapted, I learned to move around her moods. If Denise was upset, the whole house felt it. If I was upset, no one noticed. Our parents were not cruel, they were just tired, and Denise was louder. So I became easier. Easy children don't demand much. They don't complain, they don't take up space. I carried that habit into adulthood without realizing it. People often ask why someone stays in situations that hurt them. The answer is rarely simple. I stayed because Denise was my sister, because blood feels heavier than words, because leaving felt like failure. I also stayed because I believed my role was to keep things calm, to smooth edges, to absorb discomfort. I thought love meant patience. I thought loyalty meant silence. I did not yet understand that love should not require shrinking. My place at the table. At Denise's table, everyone had a role. Her husband talked about work. She talked about plans. Lily talked about school, her friends, her opinions. I listened. Sometimes I offered a small comment, a quiet joke, a gentle thought. Sometimes Denise nodded without looking at me. Sometimes she changed the subject. I learned when to stop trying. My chair was always at the far end of the table, not assigned, just available. It felt symbolic even then, but I did not question it. The disrespect did not arrive all at once. It came in pieces. A forgotten invitation, a joke at my expense, a comment like, "You wouldn't understand, Clara," or a school project. I nodded. I smiled. I brought dessert, like always. I cleaned, like always. Nothing warned me, nothing prepared me. I did not know that words spoken behind my back were finding their way forward, that a child would soon become a messenger. I left that night feeling tired but familiar with the feeling. I did not know it would be the last time I felt that way, because the next Sunday, the quiet pattern would finally speak out loud, and once it did, there would be no going back. The change did not come suddenly. It crept in the way cold does, slowly, until you realize you are already shivering. At first it was tone. Denise started speaking to me like I was a child who needed correcting. Short sentences, heavy sighs. If I shared an opinion, she would smile thinly and say, "That's not really how things work, Clara. Not cruel words, just enough to make me feel foolish." At the table, conversations began moving around me instead of including me. Plans were discussed without looking my way. Decisions were made as if I wasn't there. I would nod anyway, smile anyway, because that is what I had always done. Lily began to change too. She was no longer warm, no longer curious. She watched me now, not like a niece watches an aunt, but like someone measuring something. Sometimes she would interrupt me mid-sentence. Sometimes she would correct me. Once, when I mentioned a book I loved, she laughed softly and said, "Mom says those kinds of books are boring." Denise did not stop her. She just smiled into her glass. That moment stayed with me longer than it should have. Another Sunday, I arrived a little late. Traffic had been heavy. The rain was coming down hard. When I walked in, everyone was already seated. There was no place set for me. Denise looked up and said, "Oh, I didn't think you were coming." Her voice was casual, too casual. I stood there for a second, holding a bag of bread I had brought. No one moved, no one offered a chair. I pulled one from the corner myself. Lily watched me do it, her face unreadable. I sat quietly through that dinner. I barely spoke. At one point, Denise leaned toward Lily and said, "Some people just never grow out of depending on others." She did not look at me. She did not need to. Lily nodded, serious and thoughtful, as if she had just learned something important. That was when I felt it clearly for the first time. Not sadness, not confusion, but understanding. Words were being said about me when I was not there. Judgments were being passed quietly, repeated, absorbed, and a child was listening. After that, Lily's behavior shifted more openly. She stopped saying thank you when I helped her. She stopped responding when I spoke to her. Sometimes she would glance at her mother before answering me, as if checking which version of herself she was allowed to use. One afternoon while I was washing dishes, I heard Denise say from the other room, "You know, your aunt is just different." There was a pause. Then Lily asked, "Different how?" Denise answered without lowering her voice, "Some people don't try very hard in life." My hands froze in the sink. The water kept running. I waited for Denise to realize I could hear her. She didn't stop. I waited for Lily to say something. She didn't. That night, I drove home with my hands tight on the steering wheel. My chest felt hollow. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself adults complain sometimes. I told myself children forget. But deep down, I knew something important had already been planted. Respect, once lost, does not disappear loudly. It fades in small permissions. Permission to dismiss, permission to belittle, permission to pass judgment, And once those permissions are learned, they are easy to repeat. The house felt heavier every time I entered it after that. The air felt tighter. I noticed how often Denise spoke for me, how often. She answered questions directed at me. I noticed how Lily mirrored her tone, her posture, her little sighs. I felt like a guest who had overstayed her welcome, but I kept coming, because leaving felt like giving up. And I wasn't ready to admit that something was broken. I didn't know then that the breaking point was already waiting, that it would come quietly, from the smallest voice at the table, and when it did, there would be no misunderstanding, no pretending, just truth. It happened on a Sunday that looked like every other Sunday. Gray sky, soft rain tapping against the windows. I remember standing in my kitchen that morning, staring at the counter. I almost didn't go. My body felt heavy, like it already knew. But I told myself the same old thing. Just one more dinner, one more effort. I baked a small pie, apple. Denise used to like apple. The drive over felt longer than usual. The rain blurred the road and I kept my hands steady on the wheel. I practiced smiling at stoplights. When I arrived, the house was loud, voices, laughter. No one greeted me at the door. I let myself in, like always. Denise was in the kitchen. She glanced at the pie and said, "Just put it there." No thank you, no eye contact. I nodded and moved out of the way. Dinner was already mostly ready. Everyone took their seats quickly. I waited, then pulled a chair from the side. My plate was placed last, the smallest portion. Again, I noticed it. I always did. But that night, I didn't look away. Lily sat across from me. She didn't smile. She barely looked at me. Halfway through the meal, she stood up. Her plate still had food on it. She walked around the table slowly, very calmly. No one stopped her. No one asked what she was doing. She reached me and tipped the leftovers onto my plate. Cold potatoes, a piece of meat. It landed softly, not messy, not dramatic. Then she leaned close, so close I could smell her shampoo. Her voice was quiet, clear. "Mom says your family trash." For a moment everything went silent, not the room, just me. I felt my heart slow down instead of racing. I felt oddly clear. I looked at Denise. She didn't look back. She kept eating. That was the loudest silence I have ever known. I waited for someone to correct Lily, to laugh it off, to say, "That's not nice." Nothing happened, so I smiled. Not a big smile, just enough. I picked up my fork. I said nothing. Inside, something settled. Not anger, not hurt, decision. I finished my food slowly. I tasted none of it. When dinner ended, I helped clear the table like always. I washed dishes. I dried my hands. I hugged no one goodbye. As I walked to my car, the rain had stopped. The air felt clean. I sat behind the wheel for a long time before turning the key. I didn't cry. I just breathed. That night, I understood something I had avoided my whole life. Some people don't need your silence. They depend on it. And once a child says out loud what an adult believes, there is nothing left to explain. I drove home knowing one thing for sure: that table would never see me again. Not because I was thrown away, but because I finally chose myself. The weeks after that Sunday felt strange, too quiet, too open. For the first time in years, my Sundays were mine. No rushing, no baking, no rehearsing smiles in the mirror. The first Sunday, I woke up late. I made coffee and sat by the window. The rain came and went without meaning anything special. I kept expecting my phone to ring, an apology, an explanation. Nothing came. At first, that silence hurt more than the words ever had. It confirmed what I already knew. I did not matter to them the way they mattered to me. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Denise never called, not once. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped waiting. Something quiet began to grow inside me. Not bitterness, not pride, peace. I started filling my time with things I had postponed. Long walks, evening reading. I cooked meals I actually liked. I ate at my own table. For the first time, I noticed how much space I had been holding for other people's comfort. Then, nearly 2 years later, my phone rang. It was Denise. Her voice sounded different, lower, tired. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't mention the last time we spoke. She went straight to the problem. Her marriage had fallen apart. Her bills were piling up. The house was too big now. She said my name the way someone says a favor. I listened without interrupting. The old me would have rushed to help, would have apologized for not being there, but that part of me was gone. When she finished, there was a long pause. She waited. I spoke calmly. "I can't help," I said. She sounded surprised, almost offended. I took a breath and added gently, "I remember what Lily said, and I remember you didn't stop her." The line went quiet. Then she said, "She was just a child." I answered softly, "And you were the adult." Another silence. "I don't have anything left to give," I said, not angrily, just honestly. Then I ended the call. I set my phone down and sat still. My hands were steady. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel cruel. I felt finished. A few months after that, a letter arrived in my mailbox, handwritten. It was from Lily. Her handwriting was uneven, like she wasn't sure where each word belonged. She wrote that she was sorry, that she had grown up a little. She said she remembered that day. She said she finally understood why it was wrong. I cried then, not loudly, just enough. I wrote back. I told her I forgave her. Because children learn what they live, and she had learned from watching. But I also wrote something else. I told her that respect matters, that words stay, that silence teaches too. I wished her well, and that was enough. My revenge was never about hurting them. It was about no longer hurting myself, and in that choice, I finally found my strength. Life did not change all at once. After that, it softened. I still woke up early, still drank my coffee slowly, still walked the same streets in the evening. But something inside me stood taller. I stopped explaining myself to people who did not listen. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. The quiet in my house no longer felt empty. It felt full. Full of breath, full of rest. Sometimes I thought about Denise, not with anger, just distance. I wondered if she ever realized what she had lost. Not my help, not my presence, but my trust. Other times, I thought about Lily. I hoped she would remember the lesson gently, not as shame, but as awareness, because the words we hear as children become the voice we use on ourselves as adults. I never went back to that house, and no one asked me to. That was answer enough. People think revenge has to be loud, sharp, public, but the strongest revenge I ever took